Hey Bobby, how are you?
Hello, Jane. How are you?
I'm really good. And today you're going to satisfy 5 of my needs, aren't you?
That's quite demanding.
Yeah, I'm a very demanding woman.
But I'll do my best, love.
Okay, so we're going to be looking at my physiological needs, my need for safety, my need for love and belonging, my need for esteem, and also my self-actualization needs. So anyone who has ever read or is familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're really going to bring that into how we can satisfy the needs of our clients, whether in a group or a one-to-one date situation on a daily basis. Take it away. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, we'll assume that the first need, physiological, is already met. You know, that their need for food and shelter and safety is already being met, and that, you know, we're training someone who's healthy and hopefully alive. You know, sex is also considered a fundamental physiological need. So clearly, we don't want to fulfill any of those needs.
You might want to tell that to some of the personal trainers I know.
It's a trip straight to the HR office, really. But before you can fulfill someone's needs, you need to get clear on what it is they want and what the expectations are. And sometimes the purpose behind the work that you do isn't yet crystallized. I mean, we've all had the experience of sitting in front of somebody and asking them, what exactly are you looking to achieve? And they'll say something like, well, I just want to get in shape. Well, mate, you've already got the shape. Sometimes it's not the one you want, but it is a shape nonetheless.
Uh-huh.
But what we fail to remember is a goal is not an outcome. In their mind, all a goal is a means to an end. There's a purpose driven deeper than the goal. And a lot of times they've got to crystallize that. And the best thing we can do is not assign it for them, but help them manifest that and get really clear on why they're doing what they're doing. If you find a why, you'll find a way. You know, F. Scott Fitzgerald is one of the most acclaimed authors of the early 20th century. And if you've ever read The Great Gatsby, which is one of his more popular books, there's a section in that book that I think is brilliant and pertains to every professional. And it's when they're out in Queens and Nick is walking and sees that behind this gray and barren wasteland, there's this pair of imposing blue eyes on a billboard staring down at him. So it's like this silent, ever-present, iconic gaze over what could be symbolically an industrial ash heap. It's just void of life and it's void of promise. And it seems like there's just nothing there except these two gigantic blue eyes. And in the book Great Gatsby, these are the eyes of a guy named T.J. Eckelberg, who was an optometrist. And they're blue and gigantic, and their retinas are described by Fitzgerald as being, you know, a yard high. And they look out of what appears to be not a face, but instead of, there's these huge, enormous spectacles which pass over this non-existent nose. And these are the all-seeing eyes of Dr. Eckelberg. And I think the blue of the eyes adds contrast not only to the colorless landscape, but it lends symbolism to the novel itself. So the character of George Wilson suggests that maybe these are representative of the discerning eyes of God witnessing moral decay of society, or maybe they're depicted of the intensely flawed characters in the book that's fully engaged in their own demise. And we know from the story that the advertisement of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg was purchased a long time ago. He was trying to grow his business in the New York borough of Queens. So the billboard could represent lost dreams that were once vivid and rich. This guy starting out in his career, but now it's as faded as the billboard itself. It could represent conscience, because the characters in the book kind of get the sense that they're being watched, not only by one another, but by society, and they know that their rationalization that they're given forth for their choices are really wrong, but they're also really conspicuous. But reading this book, I had the thought, perhaps this is just, in fact, a billboard with no meaning at all. Maybe Fitzgerald's taken the piss because the only thing that has any meaning is the meaning that we invent for it. And I think that's the first step, is what is the meaning behind training? If we were to get to our goal, what would be different? So if you lost 3 kilos, what would be different then? Oh, I fit into a different size clothing. No, yeah, beyond that. Oh, I'd be able to fit into my cubicle at work. It's really tight there. Well, beyond that, what would tangibly happen in your life? And why is that absolutely important? Because if you take a look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there are some distinctions that start to emerge from every level of the pyramid. And yes, we're all driven by safety and love and certainty, significance, growth. But beyond that is self-transcendence. And self-transcendence is the revision that Maslow created for this hierarchy before his death, where he says, no, it's not just about being everything you're capable of being, which is actualization. It's about dedicating yourself to a cause greater than yourself.
Right.
And, Viktor Frankl, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, said that success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue as an unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. So we start at purpose. Why am I doing this? What will change? And if things don't change, what is the loss that will ensue? And we work back, because I think it's vastly more empathetic, vastly more effective, and less strenuous and exhausting on our lives, class after class, session after session, to assume unconditional positive regard and say to ourselves, whenever our client engages in a behavior, whether it's aligned with or contrary to their stated goals, what is the need that this behavior is either consciously or subconsciously attempting to meet?
So let's come on to number 2, safety.
Okay, safety. So let's say you have a client and they have a really bad habit, or that habit is contrary to their stated goal. So let's say somebody wants to be healthier, they want to have greater ease and activities of daily living, but let's just say, like so many people, weight loss is at the top of that for a million reasons. And they go out and they do things that are not in their best interest, like drink to excess. Or let's say they overeat on certain types of foods that really are contrary to their goal. Or even worse, they smoke. You know, you can take a look at that and say, well, they're not disciplined. They lack willpower, and you're not going to get to your goal. Or what they really need is a motivating or maybe chastising lecture from myself because they didn't get it the first time. Or we could say something to ourselves like, what is the need that they're trying to meet? You know, it's funny to me that when people overeat, Jane, they very rarely go out and binge on broccoli. Or
That's never the point, is it? But I mean, you're talking about addictions, really, because smoking, drinking, and eating are recognised addictions. They're things that we can't often control without getting into the head, I don't think.
Well, addiction's kind of a strong word, but it's not completely off the mark, to be fair. I think what we're talking about is behaviors that not only have a physical, but an emotional consequence. And I think one of the reasons why your client doesn't come in the next day and go, I know we had a plan, but I really blew it on some rocket last night, I keep falling the wagon, is because we tend to reach for foods that are very high in refined carbohydrate, sugar, high saturated fats, because of the tryptophan uptake in the brain and the release of serotonin.
Yeah.
A lot of times when we overeat, if we ask people, well, what was going on at that point? What were you feeling? The answer, more often than not, is, I was very, very stressed.
Yeah.
Or, they're making people redundant at work. Or I got home and I was just exhausted. So what happens to mindless eating? You might have someone who all day at work is in a state of fear and nothing's safe because the economy is unpredictable. And people who have been there for over a decade are no longer there. Their boss just got sacked, so if the boss can get sacked, we're all vulnerable. Then they come home and nothing's predictable there. Nothing's been done. The kids are just going absolutely boogaloo. You know, their spouse, they're fighting with them. And then, you know, they're not home. So there's all these things that are uncertain. And maybe that ice cream in the fridge is the one thing that gives them on a very real, it's not symbolic, it's not emotional. Oh, this is self-indulgent.
Oh.
This is biochemical. Oh, run away, cat. That, you know, when I reach for this, I get this serotonin release and it mitigates feelings of anxiety, feelings of fear, of worry, stress decreases. And I know that this might be the only certain thing in my life. That if I've got a few quid in my pocket, I can grab a hold of this ice cream. This ice cream will never judge me. It will never ridicule me. It won't abandon me.
So
all I need is a few quid. It's always there for me whenever I need it, which is very different than my experiences growing up and my reality. And if we approach a client like that, it's far more invested and it's far more empathetic than stepping back as the authority and going, well, you obviously don't want it badly enough. Because we have no idea how badly anybody wants anything. That's absurd.
Yeah, because we don't badly want or need the foods that we torture ourselves with. So are you saying that the food there is our safety, or that we have to recognise that they use the food as a safety blanket to express their emotions, or we have to create a new safety blanket for them, which is the reality of achieving their goals?
Well, the food is only an example. It's
Right.
the behavior. It's the latter part of what you just said that really resonates with me.
Okay.
It could be cigarettes. Cigarettes release L-DOPA, which is a precursor to dopamine.
Yeah.
So people go, oh, when I'm really stressed, I feel better after a cigarette. I feel relaxed. I feel calm. What do you mean you feel calm? It's a stimulant.
Yeah.
Well, dopamine helps us feel good. It is a reward-based neurotransmitter. So yes, the cigarette does affect us biochemically. Or
So what?
maybe it's alcohol.
What is it in the cigarette that creates levodopa?
Nicotine directly has an effect on
Does it?
L-DOPA. Mm-hmm.
That's
And it
interesting.
also affects with mental alertness, awareness. So, I mean, in limited amounts. Perpetual smoking does not improve us cognitively. It creates microhypoxia, a lack of circulation through the blood in the brain, and it can cause cognitive impairments to a significant degree as well. So it's not exactly a great brain booster, but the immediate effect of nicotine in moderate amounts is increased mental alertness. So you've got the dopamine, you've got increased mental alertness and awareness. So yeah, after people smoke, they do feel better. And a lot of times, that's the only thing that they're sure of. You know, I've got 20 or, I don't know, maybe 10, depending on your level of commitment, of my little friends that will be with me, just like the ice cream. So I know when nothing else is predictable, I could go outside and I know what I'm getting, and I know my little cancerous-causing mates will be in my pocket to help me get through that. And I think when we ask those questions, and we start to say, what is the unmet need? We can move forward, Jane. We can move forward from, oh, it's a matter of discipline, to asking better questions. Questions such as, when you reach for, whether it's sugar, when you reach for that really fatty food, when you reach for that pint, when you reach for that cigarette, what is your state? What are you feeling? Is it fear? Is it worry? Is it anger? And
Or is it habit?
What?
Or is it just habit?
Well, habit is created by repetition.
Yeah.
And Warren Buffett said something really brilliant about habit. He said the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. So habits sneak up on us because we're not examining our behaviors. And by the time we have a well-ingrained habit inroaded into our neural pathways, it's a lot harder to break because it's literally not something we do. It's part of who we are.
Okay.
And by examining behaviors and saying, what's the unmet need? Well, you know what? I feel afraid, or I feel worried or anxious when I reach for food. on what level is the next question. Is it a level 1 where it's just a bit, or is it a level 10 where I can't take it? And what does it take to trigger that behavior? So 10 might be I can't bear it, but a level 5 might just be enough to grab the food. Another question we can ask our clients is, what's the environment we are in when we reach for food? Are we alone? Are we with a group of friends? Are we out in public? So there's emotional triggers. There's the intensity of the trigger, number 2. And number 3 is, what is the environment that is combined with the trigger that most likely results in the behavior? And if we can get really clear on that, we can create substitution patterns. So what other ways can you remember a time when you were really stressed, really anxious, and you did not reach for whatever, food, cigarette, drink, and you still managed to change your state? Can you remember a specific time, and what did you do? Because it's funny, back in 2007, there was a study done by Hetzinger in the Journal of Neuroscience, and it talked about laboratory rats and the effect of exercise on dopamine. Now, our DNA is about 91% similar to that of rodents, which is why they use rodents a lot in these experiments. And what they found is that exercise, whether it's short bursts of intense exercise or cardiorespiratory exercise, elicits dopamine. So it is a reward within itself, and anyone who's ever experienced the runner's high knows this without question. But a lot of times people do not associate exercise with dopamine, with enjoyment, because we should all over them. You should do this, you should do this, you should do this, rather than focusing on the experience that occurs concomitantly with the programming strategy.
Right.
I think we need both, but that comes back to, again, why do we do what it is we do? So if we're executing a behavior or a habit because we need to feel safe, and that habit creates a biochemical response, or it's something that elicits safety, people are going to keep doing it unless we help them create wellness-based habits that allow them to replace it.
Okay, I'm with you. So let's come on now to love and belonging, number 3.
Well, love and belonging is pretty interesting.
It's the hub of Group X as well.
Well, yeah, it is, because most of what we do, Freud said, is to gain love or avoid losing love. He's not just talking about romantic love. He's talking about the sense of affiliation. Affiliation is really powerful. And once our needs for safety are met, maybe it's in the class. We feel like, we're not going to feel stupid. If we're part of the back row, we're not going to be ostracized by the instructor who's completely engaged with the front row and the people who have been in the class and they know the choreography. So once I feel okay in the environment of a group exercise class can minister to our basic human needs greater than almost anything else we could do, for a couple of reasons. One, we are exercising, so you have that serotonin and dopamine release. Number 2, we're exercising in groups, a reference group that creates a tribe. Hardwired in our brain is this tribal mentality. We all started off as members of tribes. And those tribes, no matter how big or how small, had subgroups, 7 to basically around 11 people. And when we're in groups that we resonate with, we share a sense of correspondence, we share a sense of mutual vision, we all want the same things. It not only protects us and keeps us safe, but it drives our behavior to want to be around them more and more and take on the behaviors that tribe exhibits.
Yeah,
and
brilliant.
When your tribe takes place at the pub, you don't want to lose the acceptance of that tribe. You don't want to be ostracized by that tribe, so you're going to take on the behaviors of that tribe, which is sitting on a stool for a good portion of the night, having pint after pint, and I'm not saying anything is wrong with this. It's not a judgment. It's an observation. But if your tribe is someone who enters events and outreach and does the Tough Mudder, or does marathon training, or even like 5K run, or is even engaging in group X, you're going to want to belong. You're going to want to be accepted, and you're going to want to have the feelings of belonging to a group. So that's going to go from something you have to do to something you get to do.
Okay.
It's a pull type of behavior. I think we talk about push and pull behaviors. Push is when we drive somebody towards, I better do this or else. Pull is where the activity itself is magnetic, such as going to cinema, going to theater, going out to dinner with friends. You don't have to pump yourself up and get motivated to go on holiday. The allure, the excitement, the anticipation, which is regulated by the nucleus accumbens in the brain, entices you to imagine the enjoyment you're going to receive. Well, group exercise very well can fit into that category.
Right. I'm with you. So, esteem.
Well, after we feel that we're part of a group, and, we've got that belonging, we've got that affinity or affection from the group, we feel safe, we know this certainty, we know that they'll be there for us. I think certainty is so hard-rooted, and it might not be a great example, but we've all experienced this. If you're a substitute instructor for the person who always instructs that class every Tuesday night, and you have to come down and tell the members, oh, yeah, right, you know what, Sarah couldn't make it.
Yeah.
Jane, nobody wants that walk down the stairs. It's the longest walk ever because they go nuts.
It's soul destroying. It's soul destroying being a cover tutor. What I've been put through, I've been reduced to tears, and I'm a Rottweiler. I've been reduced to tears by people who just want to torture me for not being you.
And you know what? It's not about that. It's not about you. It's a fear response. Yes. You could be Rachel Holmes showing up to substitute that class and still get that because what you took from that person was their sense of certainty.
Yes.
And when you take someone's certainty, you threaten their safety. So you put them into literally fight or flight. And at that point, they're either not taking the class or they will take the class, but they're going to fight you on it until at the end of the class they go, oh, wait, okay, that wasn't so bad. And then they're your best mates in the world, but not until. So once you're in that environment, now those needs no longer satisfy. It's like if anybody's interested in what we're saying right now and goes, oh, that resonates, well, if the air was sucked out of the room that they're sitting in, they would no longer care what either of us have to say because their number one thought would be, I need to breathe. But once you have oxygen, you're not obsessed with the thought of oxygen unless you really need to be medicated. So once a need is satisfied, it no longer motivates, and that goes to esteem. This is when not because my trainer tells me so, not because my instructor says it or my spouse says it, but because now I have to meet the need of esteem. I want recognition. I want to perform better in class. I want to put more effort in. I want to lose a kilo. I want people to notice that I'm losing a kilo. I want to be recognized for my consistency. I want to be acknowledged. I want my instructor to look at me and after they've seen me in the class 5 times and go, right, Jane, welcome back. Good job. You're consistent. And point out exactly what I'm doing that's a good job. And when I start to alter my body, I want my spouse to just stare at me for a split second or two longer than he or she normally does. So once I feel safe, once I feel like I'm part of a group and I belong, then by my own volition, not meeting the demands of somebody else, I start to want to improve because my goal is to be recognized for my accomplishments.
Yeah. I'm with you. Which brings us, and everything you've touched on, kind of at the base of the pyramid is self-actualization. And this is the heart of yoga. Yoga is all about fulfilling the self. That is its primary, the reason it started its key objective is self-actualization and self-realization.
Yeah, I think self-actualization is where you need to get to. And this is why I am so keen on the order of the needs met in this pyramid. Because you never get to belonging if you don't have safety. If you don't have safety, you don't have adherence. And if you don't feel like you belong, you're not hanging around long enough to develop any desire for esteem. But once you get to self-actualization, the goals become intrinsic. See, safety is a basic human need. Love and belonging is an extrinsic need. How will others receive me? Do I fit in? Esteem is completely about recognition, status. So that's an externally driven need, and that's okay. But you need to go through that before you get to more intrinsic needs, like DC and Ryan talk about self-determination theory, where something becomes intrinsically rewarding, where I seek to grow and I want to get better. Not because if I get better, I'll lose weight and I'll be more attractive, or, if I can become more mentally acute or attuned, I'll do better in my job, and maybe I'll get financial rewards from that, or maybe I'll get a corner office. I'm not worried about that. I am growing for its own sake. This is what Maslow defined as the realization where I must be what I can be. And if you get somebody to that point, exercise adherence is really powerful. Exercise adherence is more likely to become long-term, if not permanent.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's so useful. So when we put this out, I'll put in the hierarchy of needs so you guys can have a look and perhaps read a little bit further on the words of Maslow and the people related to him, different objectives. Bobby, do you have any books that anyone can read in relation to this that would help?
Hold on, let me have a think here. You know what I would recommend? Scientific American Mind.
Say that again?
I would recommend Scientific American Mind because it's a journal, and it's not written like the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience, where you read through very riveting and exciting abstracts and long drawn-out methodologies, and at the end of it, as as my good friend Dr. Sally Pierce would say, how do I use this? What's the takeaway if I am not a cognitive neuroscientist? But it's still scientific enough where it's not Pollyanna and, it's not pop psychology, and it's up to date. Every single month they try to put articles in there pertaining to neuroscience and psychology and personal development that are new, cutting edge, and really relevant.
So that's a journne. Could we access that online?
There are books in business and pertaining to life in general. So the personal and professional aspect, written by Maslow, and Douglas McGregor is another really good author. And I could basically, if somebody would send us an email or comment on this, I can get you materials quite specific to what it is you're looking to derive from it.
Okay.
One thing I do want to leave people with is a series of questions that you can ask your clients that will coach them and lead them rather than push them into engaging in their own behaviors corresponding with what they want. And that is, let's say you ask someone, well, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And they say something that we might typically hear, going back to, let's say, the weight loss answer. And we could say after that, well, Jane, I understand that your goal is X. What do you believe is stopping you from having what it is you want?
Yeah.
Why do you not have what you want already? So they go, I want to lose, 1 stone. Well, why do you feel you've not lost the stone presently? And what one behavior is greatest or the most consistent obstacle to reaching your goals? And why do you believe? See, we always tell people why we believe they engage in behaviors, which which doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I've just done that with you.
What?
I did that with you earlier.
You did. And case on point, it made a lot of sense to me. I went, oh, she's right about that, but I'll probably go do whatever I was going to do. I did not arrive
Story
at that
of my life.
No. So a better question, Jane, might have been, well, Bobby, why do you believe you engage in that behavior repeatedly? And I would have probably said, because I'm a mental case. And you could have gone on to say, well, what need does that behavior fulfill in you? See, if we come from the understanding that every behavior likely meets an unexpressed need with our client, this is a brilliant question. Mr. or Ms. Client, what need does that behavior fulfill in you?
Quite.
And a lot of times, Jane, the person will go, oh, I don't know. And as my friend Rob Lander is really fond of saying, and he got it from someone else, if you did know, what would you tell me? And let them sit there in their own discomfort. Because a lot of times we ask a question and somebody's really internalizing it. You can see it's uncomfortable. They don't have an answer straight away. And we jump to the next question because we get uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Let them sit there. And when they give you an answer, my question is, how do you know that's true?
Quite.
So they might go, it doesn't fulfill any need. Well, how do you know that's true? Or, you know what, it makes me feel comfort. Well, how do you know that's true?
Oh, good God.
Question, and I got this from Byron Katie, is who would you be without that belief? Or who would you be without that behavior? That is a really powerful question.
Correct.
Because it talks about certainty and it talks about safety. So, I can't stop myself from reaching from this. I'm just not disciplined. Instead of trying to tell them why they are, they're not going to listen to you. It's going to make them dig their heels in further.
Yeah.
Who without that belief? Or, I always reach for the pasty. Well, who would you be without that behavior?
Yeah.
Next question is, what other way could you fill that need? What would you need to know? Or what would you need to be convinced of or do in order to relinquish that behavior? And what does this behavior deprive you of?
Yeah.
What do you have if you didn't engage in this behavior consistently? And when you reach your goal, what needs will that achievement help you fulfill?
Yeah.
And I think these questions are a good start in the coaching process that allows them to bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Because sometimes the greatest changes in fitness begin with the most subtle changes in self-perception.
Yeah,
and
I'm with you.
Must be preceded by a behavioral change.
Cool. That's so useful, Bobby. So, guys, I think you need to listen, and I think you need to listen again. If you've got any questions or feedback for Bobby and I, please do let us know so that we can craft our interviews to suit your needs. And we are taking requests for our next series of coffee mornings. So thanks for listening, and give us your feedback. And Bobby, you're coming to England today, huh?
I'm on my way in just a couple of hours.
I shall track you down and talk to you next week.
See you next week, Jane.
Have a good flight.